Good afternoon and welcome to today's event, the Jae Myung Administration's Regional Diplomacy with China and Japan. My name is Ellen Kim. I'm an academic director here at KI. Thanks for joining us today. Since taking office, the Jae Myung administration has pursued what it calls a national interest-driven pragmatic diplomacy. But what does that mean for South Korea's approach towards its two neighbors, China and Japan? Both Chinese President Xi Jinping and Japan's new Prime Minister are expected to visit South Korea in less than 2 weeks to attend the APEC summit in Gyeongju. This makes today's discussion very timely as we take a deeper look into the Lee government's China and Japan policy with our two distinguished guests. Before I introduce them, I would like to just mention two quick housekeeping notes. First, the research and analysis they present today will appear in the next issue of the Korea Policy, which will be out in December and available on our KAI website. Second, we'll be hosting a US-ROK Shipbuilding Corporation event on November 12th. So please stay tuned for that event as well. Let me introduce from Shihoko far end. Shihoko Goto is the Vice President of Programs and Director of the Asia Program at the Foreign Policy Research Institute based in Philadelphia. She also served as a Senior Fellow for Indo-Pacific Affairs at the Mike Mansfield Foundation and Executive Board Member of the Japan Edit America Society of Washington, D.C. Previously, Shihoko was Director of the Indo-Pacific Program at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Her research focuses on geo-economic interests across the Indo-Pacific, particularly on economic relations between the United States and Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. On my left is Dr. Jo Sungmin, who is Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at the Sungkyunkwan University in Seoul, South Korea. He is also a non-resident fellow on China politics, foreign policy, and national security at the Asia Society Policy Institute's Center for China Policy Analysis. From August 2018 to May 2024, he worked as a professor at the Daniel Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, an academic institute of the U.S. Department of Defense based in Honolulu, Hawaii. His areas of expertise include U.S.-China competition, Chinese politics, and the geopolitics of Northeast Asia. Thank you, Sungmin and Shihoko, for joining us today. Both of you came from Korea and Europe 2 days ago or so, so I'm very grateful for both of you joining me today here in DC. Maybe I will start with the Sungmin. Maybe you have a short opening remarks. You would like to talk about where things are and what you think about where the Jae Myung government is heading toward China going forward.
Yes. So the question is, what is Lee Jae Myung's China policy, and then how China observe Lee Jae Myung's China policy, and then from considering both perspectives, how China-Korea relationship is likely to evolve. And I think that we can characterize, my characterization of Lee Jae Myung's China policy is a maximum flexibility. Let me first define what I mean by maximum flexibility. To do that, I'd like to compare the concept with the strategic ambiguity. The concept that many people already start to characterize Lee Jae Myung's China policy as a strategic ambiguity. But I think there is a qualitative difference from strategic ambiguity, which was also used to describe Moon Jae-in administration's China policy. Strategic ambiguity is to maintain and seek balance between US and China. That is not my word. President Moon Jae-in directly, he said that South Korea needs to seek balance between US and China. South Korea cannot take sides either of a country. So finding a right balance between the two great powers is, if that is definition of strategic ambiguity, the image of strategic ambiguity is a little static. It is to find the right in the middle, right balance between the two powers. But maximum flexibility is much more dynamic. It is about widely changing policy from one direction to another, flipping words or policy overnight. So that's what that's what Lee Jae-myung's China policy is likely to look like. And then the reason why that is that President Lee Jae-myung himself, he has a very flexible view about China. So I think many people remember when he was a leader of the opposition party during Yoon Suk-yeol government, he was very, his rhetoric really sounded like pro-China. For example, the famous line was, we just say "谢谢" to China, "谢谢" to Taiwan. South Korea doesn't have to do anything with Taiwan contingency. That's what he said during the campaign. We just say thank you to Taiwan or China. Why do we care about that? But once he becomes a president, his talking point is that U.S.-South Korea alliance is the foundation of South Korea's diplomacy. On that foundation, South Korea should manage its relationship with China. So he clearly bring in the importance of U.S.-South Korea alliance in his diplomatic strategy. So if there is a very big change from his clearly pro-China rhetoric to more balanced one from the time when he was an opposition leader and now he's president, his perspective is not very consistent. He's very flexible. And then his flexible view is it can make a big contrast with the previous leaders, Moon Jae-in, Yoon Suk-yeol, whether they are more friendly to China, more anti-China. Their perspective has been consistent. Whether they were candidates or after they become president, their views are very consistent in either way. But Lee Jae-myung's perspective is very flexible. So his intent itself is already flexible, but the security environment that his government is faced with require him to also be more flexible. That the U.S. government, Trump administration is pressuring South Korea to be more clear about its intent between U.S. and China competition, and then ask South Korea what kind of role the Lee Jae-myung government will play to contribute to the mission of deterring China. And then the strategic flexibility of USFK is at the heart of this whole debate. So there is a growing pressure from the US about whose side are you? And then second of all, there is an ongoing dispute between South Korea and China about China's maritime structure in the Yellow Sea. And third, there is a much more negative view among Chinese public, South Korean public about China compared to the time when Moon Jae-in was president. So there are those challenges that Lee Jae-myung government has to take into consideration when he was developing China policy. That situation, that's structural challenges also require him to be more flexible about his China policy. Even if he wants to unfold very pro-China policy, but he also has to consider all these challenges. So, but from the beginning, his perspective itself is flexible, and the situation requires him to be flexible as well. So in combination, his policy will be maximum flexibility, which is much more dynamic than strategic ambiguity.
That's, I think, very quick, nice observation comparing to the previous government's China policy. You mentioned about you kind of touched upon this idea about South Korea policy, pragmatic diplomacy, but at the same time centering on the strong U.S.-RK alliance. So how would you describe President Lee's approach toward China within that framework?
I think he's still, his position itself is again very dynamic. So again, compared to Moon Jae-in, who said South Korea should seek balance between the two countries, President Lee Jae-myung's rhetoric is that his talking point is always consistent after he became president. On the foundation of U.S.-South Korea alliance, on that foundation, South Korea will pursue, manage China. That South Korea will not antagonize China.
Okay.
So he's pursuing both objectives at the same time. He wants to have a friendly relationship with the US almost at the same time. That does not mean he's going to decouple from China at all. He always add and emphasize on that foundation, he will do anything to maintain South Korea-China relationship in a stable way. So it looks like he's pursuing, or he pretends those two objectives are not contradicting, but we all know there is a tension between maintaining good relationship with the US and the good relationship with China. I think his solution is that with the maximum flexibility again, he can swing very widely and very fast, rapidly, whenever needed. So he's pursuing simultaneous engagement with two countries. So compared to previous governments again, Moon Jae-in government was, well, we cannot say, and they didn't say they are antagonizing the US or they are clearly pro-China at all, but relatively compared to Park Geun-hye or Yoon Suk-yeol government, Moon Jae-in was willing to stay closer to China compared to conservative government, relatively, right? So, and then he also wants to, from that perspective, Moon Jae-in government wants to maintain a certain distance from the US to maintain strategic autonomy, autonomous space for South Korea. And the Yoon Suk-yeol government was the opposite. The Yoon Suk-yeol government was very clear about staying closer to the US, even if it means that there is some damage in South Korea-China relationship. So it is clear that if we compare Moon Jae-in government and then Yoon Suk-yeol government, Moon Jae government, the Yoon Suk-yeol government clearly prioritize US-South Korea relationship over South Korea-China relationship. Moon Jae-in government, compared to Yoon Suk-yeol government, clearly prioritize maintaining good relationship with China. So if we agree that Moon Jae-in government or Yoon Suk-yeol government, they have their own prioritization, I'm not really sure Lee Jae-myung government has such a prioritization between US and China. If there is no prioritization, I think Lee Jae-myung government is pursuing simultaneity, that they will try, whether it works or not, whether it is feasible or not, that's a different question, but they will try to simultaneously engage in both countries at the same time. But it is impossible to do that at the same time. So the one way to do that almost at the same time is that they just flip around whenever needed and engage both.
I agree with you, but here's a little bit difficult question then. How sustainable would that be if you keep changing back and forth, especially in the current environment where US-China competition is increasingly intensified? What is South Korea will do when it becomes a zero-sum game?
So that's an open question. I'm not really sure even the Lee Jae-myung administration, president or his staff have an answer for that question. This maximum flexibility is not really a matter of choice. That's one perspective to see that as well. But exactly because this is heading towards more zero-sum game, South Korea cannot take a clear position that once you take clear position, there should be a clear retaliation or punishment from the other side as well. The only way to earn time is to one, strategic ambiguity, or like Lee Jae-myung, maximum flexibility. But compared to strategic ambiguity, I think Lee Jae-myung is much more active, so maximum flexibility. So to answer your question, it depends on the tolerance and patience from either from Washington or Beijing. The strength of maximum flexibility is that you can buy some time while Beijing or Washington, they are confused. It is not only foreign officials in Washington or Beijing, they are confused about Lee Jae-myung's intent, but even domestically, conservative newspaper, Joseonilbo or the progressive side, they occasionally print editorial asking, what is Lee Jae-myung government's intent? Not only about foreign policy issue, but also about domestic economic issues. Sometimes Lee Jae-myung emphasize the constructive role of big companies, but also on the other next day he also gave more support for labor union as well. So there is a lot of this change of policy. So it depends on how patient Beijing or Washington can be. And then the first retaliation, I think, come from Beijing this time when Beijing sanctioned one of 5 South Korean companies in the U.S. in the under Hanwha shipbuilding industry. So China started take some action to give a warning signal to the South Korean government. And I didn't hear yet how Lee Jae-myung government is going to respond to that. But it seems like China is taking action.
Okay, interesting. Maybe Shihoko, let me turn to you. Since taking office, President Lee has met with Prime Minister Ishiba 3 times in just 4 months. And I think that's very significant. So I want to ask you about your current assessment of overall relationship between Korea and Japan under their leadership. Are there any unique, any notable areas of progress or achievements under their leadership you would like to highlight? And how is President Lee's active outreach toward Japan is being received in Tokyo?
Yeah, well, first of all, Ellen, thank you so much for inviting me to this very timely discussion. And quite frankly, this is such a perfect time to be talking about Japan-Korea relations. Tomorrow, the Japanese government will formally be announcing Takaichi Sanae as Japan's new prime minister. We can talk about the domestic politics of Japan later on, but going to your question about how the new Korean leadership is being viewed in Japan, let me just emphasize that in both Seoul and Tokyo, I believe there has been a lot of concern about how domestic politics will determine the foreign policy vision of each country. And Japan's concern had been that whether the impeachment of President Yoon and the new administration that follows, whether there would, how that may hurt or help Korea-Japan relations, especially since there had been considerable advancements made under the Yoon presidency, and at the same time, President Lee, as candidate, had taken a more hawkish stance towards relations with Tokyo. And so I think this whole idea of maximum flexibility in action has been played out in Seoul under the Lee administration to date, and there has been a great deal of relief in Tokyo as a result. There hasn't been any blowback to relations between Japan and Korea, and actually, relationships have continued to improve steadily since Camp David in 2023. Bear in mind that at that time, Japan had, that was 2 leaders ago in Japan under Prime Minister Kishida. And it's also important to bear in mind that public opinion in both Japan and Korea have improved steadily since 2023 as well. And so we see President Lee, his actions really have spoken much bigger than words. And it is clear that he values relations with Tokyo, and that there has been a continued commitment on this shuttle diplomacy where there is continued engagement between the leadership of the 2 countries, but also at the working level as well, between the economic ministries and the defense ministries as well. And the dialogue has been incredibly constructive, and that has been valuable for both Japan and Korea. Now, if we look at Japan's leadership now, as I said, Camp David came under the leadership of Kishida. Ishiba, who succeeded him, has resigned. Now we will have a new prime minister, Takaichi Sanae, who should be taking office tomorrow. But all of these 3 leaders, they all represent the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. And so the expectation is that even under a new leadership, Japan will continue to pursue what the LDP has envisioned. And none of the LDP leaders, including Takaichi, is expected to tear down what their predecessors have been able to establish, and that Takaichi is expected to continue to build on the positive relations that her predecessors have been able to come up with. Now, we can discuss what that kind of vision will be. And the wild card, of course, in all of this is that the power of the ruling LDP itself has been quite diminished. And so the power and influence of the party that the LDP will be building its coalition with, Isshin no Kai, which is the innovation party of Japan, how they might be signaling or guiding Japan's foreign policy moving forward, that's going to be the wild card in how relations move forward.
So I want to pick on that question because, we have seen some political uncertainty in Japan following the resignation by Ishiba and then the breakup of the LDP Komeito coalition. And then yesterday there was an announcement that LDP is now signing a coalition agreement with this Osaka-based Rohin-Yokai Japan Innovation Party. So you indicated that it's pretty clear that Takaichi Sanae will be the prime minister. Probably tomorrow we'll find out. But so I want to pick on that and ask you about, from this new coalition between LDP and Japan Innovation Party, what can we expect more? Because obviously the Japan Innovation Party obviously have a more hawkish,
Right.
More conservative than the Komeito. So I'm curious about what developments can we expect from that coalition,
Right.
both domestically or internationally?
Yeah. So traditionally, Japanese politics has been pretty stable. And so we've seen the LDP, with very few exceptions, essentially rule Japan. Over the past 26 years, though, the LDP has essentially been in a coalition government with the Komeito, which is a party that is supported by Soka Gakkai, which is a religious group. So you had this alliance between these two parties, but they had been functioning, and this was expected to continue in this new government. But the LDP's foothold in Japanese party politics has been steadily waning. And over the past year, in the election at the upper house and the lower house, the LDP suffered a significant defeat. And this is why it's being forced to move into a coalition government, and the Komeito has abandoned the LDP, and so the LDP has had to scramble for a new partner. We now have a new partner for the LDP, Isshin no Kai, which is a party that originated in Osaka as a regionally focused party. It is also new. It's only been around for about a decade. But it is very popular, and it's also important to bear in mind that why has there been this backlash from the Japanese public against the LDP and stability? It's been a voice of voter frustration with the Japanese domestic status quo, a great deal of frustration about low wages, a kind of stratified employment systems, and a backlash against some of the social changes that we're seeing in Japan as well. So the LDP is going to have to recast itself as a political voice that can rally voters. And the next election, this is a parliamentary system, so if all goes well, there does not have to be an election until October of 2028. So Takaichi has the ability to really consolidate her party, consolidate the Japanese political base that she has, but we are still looking at what exactly that means. We have yet to see the appointment of critical cabinet posts. Those will be announced tomorrow. We will have, we're not exactly sure how the Isshin the Innovation Party will work together with the LDP. The expectation is that the Innovation Party does not want specific cabinet posts, but it will have a sizable control in how some of the issues are put forward. And especially given the fact that even the LDP together with the Innovation Party, they actually still do not have the votes. You need 233 votes. They still only have 231. So on each legislation, it's going to have the Japanese government, the Diet, is going to have to negotiate each and every legislation that comes forward. And so that is the price of democracy. It will be very arduous. It will take a long time. And there are a lot of unknowns at the moment.
I want to go back to Sungmin, but before I do that, I'll just finish the Japan part a little bit so that we stay focused. If Sanae Takaichi becomes a prime minister, you kind of mentioned that she will likely continue her predecessor's policy.
Yeah.
But are there any risks of backsliding in the relationship or any potential area of friction that could emerge down the road?
Right. Well, Takaichi herself says that she is the successor of the vision of Shinzo Abe. Right. From a Japanese perspective, what does that mean in terms of foreign policy implications? There are two areas where she is expected to carry the torch of Abe. One is on the economic part, the economic vision, which is Abenomics, 3 arrows, greater fiscal spending, easy monetary policy, and more deregulation. And so she is expected to kind of build on that foundation and continue to have what she calls a more responsible, proactive approach to economic policy. And this is what the governments, especially here in Washington, is looking the most closest to, because this goes into the second part, which is Japan's security policy. And Abe was the one who was the architect of the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, which really, in a nutshell, focused on countries in the region rallying around shared interests and a commitment to a rules-based regional order. She is expected to continue that vision, and the expectation is that she will enhance that free and open Indo-Pacific vision. But for that to be successful, she needs buy-in not just from within the Japanese political parties, but also buy-in and commitment and continued support from key partners, especially from Korea. And so this is something that I believe that she will adopt a more flexible strategy as well. And that her realist approach will be to ensure that she has strong ties with Korea.
Sungmin, I want to go back to your China again, but so now that the Lee Jae-myung China policy basically be maximum flexibility, how has China been perceiving that? And this year, China has been improving its relation with North Korea, as we saw the renewed summit meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in China. And also the Chinese Premier Li Chang also visited North Korea a few weeks ago to attend this large-scale military parade to mark the founding of the North Korean ruling party. So the question then is, what is China's, how should we interpret Beijing's approach to Korea?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start from Shihoko-san's remark that there was a big relief in Tokyo about Lee Jae-myung's surprising engagement with Tokyo. To that extent, there was a disappointment or frustration on Beijing's side. So when Lee Jae-myung was just elected, there was all the excitement and with the congratulatory remarks from Xi Jinping, and then Chinese media, Chinese scholars, they were all expecting the great improvement between the two countries because Yoon Suk-yeol government was so anti-China, they perceive. They were really frustrated about Yoon Suk-yeol government's pro-US policies. So now the new president, who is known with all this pro-China rhetoric before, when he was when he said this South Korea has nothing to do with the Taiwan contingency, when he said that, I remember Chinese media referred to him as the most reasonable politician in South Korea. So there was a high expectation, but when there is a high expectation, disappointment can be deeper. So after he visited Japan first, even before visiting China and Washington D.C., and then his policy statements also changed dramatically to emphasize U.S.-South Korea alliance and also U.S.-South Korea-Japan trilateral as well. So there was a suspicion from Beijing, or the sense of surprise that what is he doing? He was supposed to emphasize South Korea-China relationship. He was supposed to visit China first before he visited Japan, like every president did. I mean, from democratic side at the least. But so he was breaking that Chinese expectation. So there was a disappointment, followed by some critical comments from the Chinese media, Huanchuo Shibao, Global Times, or experts' commentaries in the Chinese media. They all say that there are some talking points from the Chinese authorities that Chinese media also follow, which is that it is irrational for South Korea to pursue closer relationship with the US. South Korea's best interest lies in stable relationship with China, given South Korea's economic dependency on Chinese economy. So Chinese media emphasize a lot, as if reminding every time that your interest lies in stable relationship with us. So given your dependency on us, so why don't we just pursue our mutual interest? And then the talking point is that our bilateral relations should not be impacted by the third party, clearly indicating the US. So it is irrational that South Korea voluntarily become the pawn of the US strategy to deter China. But again, later, so that's the disappointment and then critical comment. And then the third stage is that still they have a confidence that confidence in general about Trump administration's creating trouble with its own allies and partners. And then sooner or later, South Korea, Lee Jae-myung government will realize that they're going to run into some problem like any allies do. And then they start to see this incident about the arresting 300 Hyundai workers at Georgia, in Georgia, and also this ongoing negotiation over, very difficult negotiation over $350 billion investment in the US from South Korea. So seeing this evidence, Chinese are saying, they say themselves that they can be patient to wait until Lee Jae-myung government and Trump bromance will break down and then Lee Jae-myung will come back. That leads to the Chinese perspective on North Korea. So I start with the displeasure about South Korea's turning to Japan. I think many people seem to miss that information that Xi Jinping actually invited Lee Jae-myung first to come to Beijing for this Victory Day event. So on July 1st, a high official from Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs visited his counterpart in Seoul, South Korea. So he visited South Korea Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there it seems like he passed Xi Jinping's intent to invite Lee Jae-myung. So there was no official invitation from Beijing to Seoul, but at the working level there was a passage of the delivery of the invitation. So a high official from the South Korea's presidential office also confirmed this fact. And President Lee himself, when he did an interview with the Time magazine, he also mentioned that Beijing seems to want me to come to this victory ceremony. And then on Chinese side media as well, they also confirmed, they also mentioned China wants to invite Lee Jae-myung, because they believe that Lee Jae-myung might come. The conservative government, Park Geun-hye as a conservative president, she even came for the victory ceremony 10 years ago. then why not this pro-China democratic leader would not come? But as we know, President Lee Jae-myung decided to go to Japan first, and then 2 weeks later, Beijing acknowledged officially that they invited Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-un would come. But if we see the timing, carefully see the timing, when Beijing announced the invitation of Kim Jong-un, South Korea presidential office responded that we already knew that Beijing invited Kim Jong-un in the middle of August. In the middle of August, that was the time that Lee Jae-myung announced to visit China first. So it is clear that Beijing wanted to invite Lee Jae-myung first. Now the question is whether so there can be two possibilities. Xi Jinping wanted to invite Lee Jae-myung only, not Kim Jong-un. The second hypothesis is that Xi Jinping had the thought to invite both Kim Jong-un and Lee Jae-myung together and arrange some kind of meeting there. That we don't know, but it is significant that Beijing wanted to invite Lee Jae-myung, and then to that extent, Beijing's invitation of Kim Jong-un is somehow tactical decision, not really strategic decision. If it is not improvised, it is still tactical decision, and then what that means is that there is still room for us, South Korea and the US, to engage with Beijing about North Korean affairs. That may be precisely Beijing's intent to strengthen their negotiation power over Korean issue by inviting Kim Jong-un. But I think we should keep in mind that Beijing's invitation of Kim Jong-un and then the three authoritarian leaders' presence in Beijing does not mean that their unity to antagonize the U.S. Each of them has an issue to negotiate with the U.S. and they all there is a strategic interest to have an optic of their unity. But at the same time, I think we need to see through that their gathering can be also tactical gathering as well.
So you are saying that the trilateral solidarity, it looks like really strong outside. From inside, there's a lot of strategic, their own individual interests that driving this.
Yes.
It could be a marriage of convenience. You still think that is the case?
I think many people think that way in Washington, D.C. There are already many articles published to make that claim. What I'm adding is the little but important episode that Xi Jinping wanted to invite Lee Jae-myung first. It was already widely reported, but it seems like we forgot that. And then it is very significant that Xi Jinping invited Lee Jae-myung even before Kim Jong-un or together with Kim Jong-un, that we don't know, but either way, that's very significant.
So then that leads a question to the meeting, upcoming meeting between President Lee and President Xi Jinping, who is going to visit Korea. This is his first time to visit to Korea since first visit to Korea since his last one in 2014. So many people are watching this meeting very carefully and closely. What do you think? What are the expectations for that meeting? What do you think will happen?
Well, this is a multilateral and short meeting, so I don't expect a big announcement about North Korea or Taiwan. There will be a symbolic gesture and then some declaration to affirm the goodwill from Beijing and Seoul about maintaining their relationship in a stable manner. But that said, they can still talk about the areas of cooperation, first in economy and second on the affairs of the Korean Peninsula. In economy, they still have a common interest in maintaining trade and green economy or industry for aging population. So they're going to talk about that to show their goodwill toward each other. For Korean affairs, here is very interesting comparison between Beijing's and then Moscow attitude toward North Korea's nuclear program. Russia, they officially de facto acknowledge North Korea's nuclear program, Russia's defense minister said he respect and also understand North Korea's nuclear program. That is I think we can take it as a de facto acknowledgement of North Korea's nuclear program. But more important is that compared to that, Beijing has not said to that level yet. Xi Jinping should stand next to Kim Jong-un. They had a bilateral meeting, but China didn't go far as Russia did about acknowledging North Korea's nuclear program. So that leaves a room for Lee Jae-myung and Xi Jinping to talk about the peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and possibly denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula as well. So those are the two areas that Lee Jae-myung and Xi Jinping can comfortably talk about. But they will also try to deliver their own talking point. China is that South Korea-China relationship should not be affected by the third party. That will be his first talking point. If Xi Jinping goes a little further, he may try to advise Lee Jae-myung that think about your best interests, be rational. Don't be irrational to be the pawn of the U.S. Or the third country's strategy. But it depends on Xi Jinping's choice, how far he's going to press South Korea. On the part of South Korea, Lee Jae-myung can also, he would also have his own talking points, that he would emphasize his willingness to, despite all this emphasis on the U.S.-South Korea alliance, he will emphasize his goodwill to improve relationship with China. But if he goes a little further, then he would emphasize China's role as a responsible stakeholder in the regional affairs. He would ask China to be more, to use dialogue to resolve regional issues. And then by doing that, he wants to create his Lee Jae-myung, South Korea's image as a bridge between China and the U.S., as he said many times. But we'll see how far he will say such things.
Shihoko, so President Trump, before he goes to Korea, he's also going to visit Japan. And President Trump will also going to meet President Xi, and also Japan's new prime minister will be there as well, and probably meet with the President Lee as well. So there's a lot of things going on. This is a very high-stakes summit. So I wanted to ask you, for our audience, what developments would you be watching most closely and during these visits and events, and why?
Yeah, so there are two real challenges, right? One is the logistical side. Tomorrow we are expecting Takaichi to be formally announced and accepted as Japan's new prime minister. A couple of days after that, she will be giving a policy speech outlining her vision as leader. Then a couple of days after that, President Trump will be in Tokyo. And then after that is the APEC summit in Seoul. So this is going to be a lot of meetings and a lot of expectations for someone who is coming from really trying to gain that political position. So pivoting from domestic political party politics to foreign policy, bigger vision, Japan's longer term goals is something that is a high stakes game, as you said. One thing I do want to emphasize is that when it comes to President Trump and having his year is something that is very important. And so when it comes to policies regarding Europe and the Russia-Ukraine war, there are a number of key European leaders, including the Finnish president as well as the British Prime Minister and the European Commission head and the like, who have the trust and who are able to influence or at least have access to Trump. When we turn to the Indo-Pacific, there is no leader who has that kind of sway with President Trump. And the hope in Japan, and I believe that it would be good for the broader stability of the Indo-Pacific as well, for Takaichi to be able to rise to that level to, again, if she is seeing herself as the successor to Shinzo Abe, who did have good relations with Trump and who had the ear of the US president, if she is able to garner that kind of position for herself and for the country, and to kind of emphasize the importance of the Indo-Pacific, and to share the vision of the Indo-Pacifics when it comes to their China challenge. I also want to emphasize that when it comes to regional Indo-Pacific concerns, including Japan and Korea, there is a great deal of concern about the economic trajectory. And there's a great deal of concern about excessive dependence on China. Now, we know that decoupling from China is not a possibility at all, and it's not a desirable outcome either. And there are various degrees of wanting to de-risk depending on the country. And no one country sees eye to eye on how to de-risk from China. But at the same time, excessive dependence on China in areas like critical minerals is seen as a tool that China could weaponize. And we've already seen at the latest G7 meeting that there are efforts for greater coordination amongst the advanced economies to be able to work together so that China does not have that chokehold on a critical area. Some would argue that it's maybe a little bit too late, but at the same time, it does signal that there is a shared vision, and there can be more that's done. One issue that I would be looking at the upcoming APEC summit would be to focus on some of those areas of key concern that could offset some of the chokeholds that China has, and one of those areas would be in dollar dominance. There is a great deal of movement towards de-dollarization, and we've seen the Trump administration come up with issuing stable coins. 3 main large Japanese commercial banks have started talking about issuing private sector stable coins. This is, for the United States, it is seen as one way to ensure that the U.S. dominance in the global financial markets continues. That is a source of stability. That is, I believe, a shared interest amongst advanced economies, and this is an area which the United States and its allies still have the upper hand. So to kind of preempt that advancement, that dominance to be taken away, would be something that I would be looking at the APEC summit for.
Thank you. We have about 11 minutes, so I would like to take some questions from the floor and also from the online audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand and identify yourself. So I'll go with Terence first.
Hi, my name is Terence Matsuo. I'm a non-resident fellow here at KEI. Thank you to the panelists for this very interesting discussion. My question is about China, Japan, Korea trilateralization. Towards the tail end of the Yoon administration, there are attempts to kind of strengthen that with the creation of a secretariat, I believe. And so I would like to hear the panel's kind of understanding of where that process is going to go under Jae Myung, as well as efforts to reach a trilateral trade agreement between the two of them. Thank you.
Well, I had not heard the Lee Jae Myung government's, when I say Lee Jae Myung government, foreign minister or his staff or President Lee Jae Myung himself, commenting about trilateral among China, Japan, and South Korea. But when the time comes for the next meeting, I think he would welcome that the initiative, and he would welcome to have another meeting. Even the conservative Yoon Suk-yeol government was eager to hold trilateral with China as a way to engage with China together with Japan. For President Lee, the hard question was about the trilateral with US and Japan. When he was an opposition leader, everyone thought that he's going to be very he is going to be following the tradition of Democratic Party. He will be critical about Japan's the history issue. So he's going to maintain some distance from Japan, moving closer to China. But he already engaged with Japan. He did difficult homework already. So the next step for China, Japan, South Korea trilateral will be even easier for him to do. So I think, although he didn't really comment about that, but I'm positive that he will seize the opportunity if there is any momentum on that trilateral meeting.
Professor?
My question is, what happens if your rather rosy expectations are not fulfilled? I heard words maximum flexibility, pragmatism, realism, and those seem somewhat optimistic given the tensions between the US and China, given the way Trump proceeds. So, and given Takaichi's interest without the Komeito to influence her now, to carry on a new Taiwan policy, a Yasukuni visits, and other things. So what are the black swan events that you can anticipate that might interfere with this hopeful scenario that you mainly address?
Yeah, I think that this maximum flexibility is not really the idea out of optimism or positivism, positive idea. I think it is more the product of the sense of urgency that what's the alternative then, that Lee Jae-myung clearly cannot take the position of Yoon Suk-yeol government, clear pro-China, pro-US, but he cannot also pursue clear move closer to China without considering this big pressure from Trump administration and then daily stronger anti-China perspective in DC. So I think that's the only way that he can maintain this, navigate this very difficult situation, just being flexible as much as possible. But that gets to your question, how sustainable will it be with a new surprise may come from Japan? And then, since you mentioned, when I read Chinese discourse about Lee Jae-myung's China policy or diplomacy, Chinese also said a lot that sooner or later, South Korea and Japan, they are going to run into history problem again. And it looks like the day may come earlier than even Chinese expected. So there is a black swan. But even for that matter, I think Lee Jae-myung government will deal with maximum flexibility. That if that happens, then he may go to China, coordinate with China. Then, as it happened during the Moon Jae-in administration, when President Moon Jae-in, Shinzo Abe, they quarreled, they spat each other. Then the U.S. intervened. And then the U.S. was frustrated about the breaking down of the bilateral relationship between Japan and South Korea. That drama may repeat again. But Moon Jae-in government didn't really change the position. But this time, Lee Jae-myung may sweep the position again, that he may suddenly engage with Japan as well. So I think he will play with the maximum flexibility as much as possible, until really the worst case that he is really forced to make choice, which is something like an extreme situation like military conflict in Taiwan. If such a thing happens, then that's the situation that he has to make a choice and let the world know. But until that happens, I think he's gonna just stick to maximum flexibility instead of making clear his position now. And that will only bring, making his position clear about the future event will only bring China's aggressive reaction today. So again, I think flexibility is the only way that he can survive now.
What about from Tokyo's perspective? Is there any black swan?
Yeah, so
rising?
black swans are interesting, right? Because it's not things like Taiwan or North Korea, because we all do these simulation exercises on what may or may not happen. The obvious one would be natural disasters. Those are, by their very nature, you are not able to predict, and there's only so much you can do to prepare. The other one, of course, is going to be about cybersecurity and cyber attacks and the disruption that deliberate or otherwise that could occur as a result, and what that does to regional stability. I do want to say, though, I want to push back a little bit on your thought that this is a very optimistic interpretation of what's to come. I think since 2023, since Camp David, the sources of instability and uncertainty have actually only increased, and which has brought Korea and Japan closer together. And so let's look, for instance, on the US trade approach to trade. Both Japan and Korea are committed to remaining good, solid economic partners with the United States. Both countries are committed to continuing to invest in the United States, but at the same time, both are facing challenges in, with the tariff agreements, and also the commitment of $350 billion and $550 billion, respectively, that is expected from the Trump administration. So given these shared concerns, there is going to be greater impetus to keep domestic political interests in check and focus more broadly on their foreign policy goals, which I believe are actually more in alignment than they had been in the past.
I think we have we can take one more question from the audience, if there is a question. Okay, I have a question for you, Sungmin. No one has yet asked this, but do you think that President Trump-Kim summit might happen? What do you think is the
I think that's very high. My opinion is minority, but I think it's highly possible from two perspectives. That they already said a lot. That Trump said in August, he said he's willing to meet with Kim Jong-un without any conditions, and that is interpreted as that even denuclearization may not be on the agenda, but Trump is still willing to meet with Kim Jong-un. And then some days later, Kim Jong-un also responded that, as long as the U.S., he said, as long as the U.S. is not obsessed with the goal of denuclearization, then why not? There is no reason for us, North Korea, to sit with Trump, he said. And then he also said that he has fond memories with President Trump. So they already signal they have an interest in meeting with each other. And then second perspective is that they actually met in 2019 at Panmunjom over 2 days notification that President Trump Twitter that I'm in Japan, I can fly to Panmunjom if Kim Jong-un is willing to meet with him, and then Kim Jong-un responded the next day. I believe, of course, there should be some communication at the working level, but still the timing should be very short. So they have a willingness, and then they have a past experience of making a pop-up meeting. So why not this time when President Lee is also very eager to be the bridge between the East and West. So everywhere there is a willingness from South Korea, from U.S. and Pyongyang that they want to make this happen. So I think there is a possibility.
Okay, we'll see what happens. I think it's a 50-50 bet, but it's getting interesting. But anyway, thanks. Today's discussion, I think, offered really valuable perspective on South Korea's approach to two countries are very critical to South Korea, and also very timely preview of the upcoming APEC summit. So I'd like to thank our two speakers for their thoughtful insights, and then so please join me in a warm applause for our speakers.